The icy winds howled across the barren moon, carrying with them a biting chill that cut through even the thickest layers of insulation. Captain Elias Voss tightened his grip on the edges of his thermal tent, pulling it closer around him as he huddled inside. His breath misted in the cold air, forming tiny clouds that disappeared almost instantly. Outside, the landscape stretched endlessly, a sea of white and gray under a dim, dying star. It was desolate, lifeless, and utterly unforgiving. Elias sighed, leaning back against the wall of his makeshift shelter. He had been stranded here for 3 days now, ever since his ship's navigation system malfunctioned during what should have been a routine survey mission. Repairs were slow going. The freezing temperatures made every task twice as difficult. But it wasn't just the physical strain wearing on him, it was the loneliness. Out here, there was no one to talk to, nothing but silence except for the relentless wind. As he stared at the flickering glow of his portable heater, lost in thought, a faint sound broke through the monotony. Scratch, scratch, it came again, soft but deliberate, from somewhere near the entrance flap of the tent. Elias froze, his hand instinctively reaching for the plasma torch lying nearby. Stranded or not, caution was second nature to someone like him. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice steady despite the unease creeping up his spine. No response, just another scratch, this time louder. Heart pounding, Elias rose to his feet, clutching the torch tightly. With slow, deliberate movements, he unzipped the tent flap just enough to peek outside. At first, all he saw was snow, mounds of it piled high against the darkness. Then, movement caught his eye. There, half buried in the drifts, was a figure, small, fragile-looking, and unlike anything he'd ever seen before. Her skin shimmered faintly, catching the dim light like polished opals. Long, delicate limbs poked out from beneath tattered fabric-like wrappings that seemed more decorative than functional. Her large, almond-shaped eyes glowed softly, locking onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. She didn't speak, not with words anyway, but her gaze conveyed everything. Hunger, exhaustion, desperation, and something else, trust, hope. For a moment, Elias hesitated. Letting an unknown creature into his only source of warmth could be dangerous. What if she was sick? Or worse, hostile? But then she swayed slightly, her knees buckling as though she couldn't stand much longer. Against his better judgment, Elias stepped forward, scooping her up gently before retreating back into the tent. He laid her down near the heater, watching as color slowly returned to her translucent skin. She murmured something unintelligible, her voice melodic yet alien. Whatever she was, wherever she came from, one thing was clear: she needed help. And for reasons he couldn't quite explain, Elias felt compelled to give it. Little did he know, this act of kindness would change everything, for both of them. The warmth from the portable heater slowly seeped into the alien girl's body, her shimmering skin beginning to glow faintly as she regained strength. Elias watched her cautiously, unsure of what to do next. She was unlike anything he'd ever encountered, her presence both mesmerizing and unsettling. Her large, luminous eyes darted around the tent, taking in every detail before finally settling on him. For a moment, they just stared at each other, two beings from entirely different worlds. Elias cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "You're safe here," he said hesitantly, though he doubted she understood human language. To his surprise, her lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. Then, without warning, a series of melodic hums filled the air. The sound was soft and soothing, like wind chimes swaying in a gentle breeze. It wasn't speech, not exactly, but it carried meaning all the same. Suddenly, images flashed through Elias's mind. Stars swirling in vast galaxies, rivers of light cascading across endless voids, and strange creatures moving gracefully among crystalline structures. He blinked, startled by the sudden intrusion. Was this some kind of telepathic communication? Before he could process it further, the images faded, leaving behind only the memory of their beauty. "She's trying to talk," Elias muttered to himself, leaning closer. But how? As if sensing his confusion, the girl reached out with one slender hand, her fingers brushing lightly against his temple. A jolt of energy shot through him, not painful, but startling enough to make him jerk back. When he looked at her again, her expression had softened, and her lips moved as though forming words. "Leora," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the heater. "Leora," Elias repeated, testing the name on his tongue. She nodded, her glowing eyes brightening slightly. Encouraged, he pointed to himself. "Elias." "Elis," she echoed haltingly, her pronunciation awkward but endearing. A grin spread across Elias's face despite himself. Communication, a breakthrough. Over the next few hours, Leora continued to share fragments of information, piecing together a rudimentary understanding between them. Through gestures and mental projections, she explained that her people thrived on energy, drawing sustenance not from food or water, but from heat and light. This revelation made sense of why she had been drawn to his tent, and why she seemed particularly fascinated by the heater. But there was something else. As Elias observed her, he noticed faint cracks appearing along her translucent skin, spreading like spider webs. Concerned, he leaned forward, pointing at the marks. "What is this? Are you hurt?" Leora hesitated, her expression darkening. She touched her own arm, then mimicked holding something, a container, perhaps, and tilted it toward him. Energy. She needed more energy, and whatever reserves she had left were dwindling fast. Despite his growing trust, Elias couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't telling him everything. Why had she come here alone? What was she really after? Still, when she placed her glowing fingertips on a torn seam in his jacket and sealed it effortlessly, repairing the damage with a single touch, his suspicions wavered. There was no denying her abilities or her intelligence. By the time night fell on the icy moon, Elias found himself sitting cross-legged beside Leora, sharing packets of nutrient paste from his survival kit. She didn't eat them, of course, but she appreciated the gesture, humming softly in gratitude. For the first time since landing on this desolate rock, Elias felt less alone. But even as he drifted off to sleep, lulled by the gentle rhythm of her melodies, questions lingered in his mind. Who was Leora, really? And what did she truly want? The days passed in a blur of discovery and unease. Elias spent most of his time observing Leora, trying to piece together the puzzle she presented. She was unlike anyone, or anything, he had ever met. Her presence brought an odd mix of comfort and tension to the cramped confines of the tent. While her abilities were remarkable, repairing damaged equipment with a touch, projecting vivid images into his mind, there was something about her that didn't sit right with him. It wasn't fear, exactly, but a nagging suspicion that she hadn't revealed everything. One evening, as Elias worked on repairing his broken communication console, frustration mounting with each failed attempt, he noticed Leora watching him intently. Her luminous eyes followed every movement of his hands, and when he finally set the tool down with a sigh, she tilted her head slightly, as though considering something. "Not working," she said softly, her voice hesitant but clear. Elias looked up, surprised by her use of words. "No," he admitted. "It's too damaged. Without the right parts, I can't fix it." Leora rose gracefully to her feet and approached the console. For a moment, she simply stood there, her fingers hovering above the surface without touching it. Then, to Elias's astonishment, the device began to hum faintly. Lights flickered back to life, and the screen lit up with static before stabilizing into a familiar diagnostic display. "What? How did you do that?" Elias stammered, scrambling to his feet. He stared at the console, then at Leora, who stepped back with a satisfied smile. "Energy," she replied simply, pressing one glowing hand over her chest. "I give." Elias frowned, his earlier suspicions flaring anew. "You've been holding out on me," he said, crossing his arms. You could have fixed this days ago. Why now? Leora hesitated, her expression shifting from calm to troubled. She gestured for him to sit, then knelt beside him, placing both hands on the ground between them. Closing her eyes, she projected another series of images into his mind, this time far more detailed than before. He saw flashes of sleek ships gliding through space, cities made of shimmering crystal, and crowds of beings like Leora, their skin glowing brightly under alien suns. But the vision quickly turned darker. Explosions tearing through those cities, skies choked with smoke, and desperate refugees fleeing into the void. When the images faded, Elias sat in stunned silence, processing what he'd seen. "Your people, they're in trouble," he said slowly. "That's why you're here, isn't it? You weren't just looking for warmth. You were sent to scout." Leora nodded, her gaze dropping. "Yes. My kind. We need help. Energy runs low. We search new places. And you thought Earth might be a target?" Elias asked sharply, his tone hardening. The implications hit him like a punch to the gut. If her species needed energy to survive, what would stop them from draining Earth's resources dry? "No," Leora exclaimed, her voice rising in panic. She grabbed his arm, her touch cool but urgent. "Not take. Share. Symbiosis. We bond with willing hosts, share strength. No harm." Elsa studied her face, searching for any sign of deception. Her earnestness seemed genuine, but trust didn't come easily, not when the stakes were so high. "If you came to find allies, why not just say so?" he demanded. "Why all the secrets?" Her shoulders slumped, and for the first time, she looked truly vulnerable. "Fear," she whispered. "Humans. Unpredictable. Some fight first, ask later." Elias sighed, running a hand through his hair. He couldn't argue with that. Humanity's history was riddled with conflict and mistrust. Still, the thought of playing host to an alien species, even one as seemingly benevolent as hers, was daunting. What if accepting her offer meant opening the door to others? Could he really make that decision on behalf of an entire planet? As the weight of the situation settled over him, Elias realized there was only one way forward: to learn more. Whatever choice he made, it had to be informed and careful. But deep down, he already knew one thing for certain: Leora had changed everything. Elias spent the next day wrestling with his thoughts, pacing the small confines of the tent as Leora watched him quietly. She didn't press him for answers or try to sway his decision. Instead, she simply waited, her glowing eyes following his every move. It was unnerving, but also strangely comforting, like she understood the gravity of what he was considering. Finally, unable to bear the silence any longer, Elias stopped in front of her. "You said your people form bonds with hosts," he began, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside him. "What does that mean? What happens if I agree?" Leora tilted her head, as though choosing her words carefully. "Bond is connection," she explained haltingly. "We share energy. You give. We give back. Strength, knowledge, life." "Life," Elias echoed, frowning. "You mean you keep me alive longer?" She nodded, her expression softening. "Yes. Longer, stronger. But bond requires trust. Both must open fully. Vulnerable." Elias rubbed the back of his neck, skepticism creeping into his tone. "And what about the risks? What happens if something goes wrong?" Her gaze dropped, and for a moment, she looked almost guilty. "Risks exist," she admitted. "Energy flows both ways. If imbalance, host may weaken. Temporary only at first. Must learn balance together." Temporary weakness. That didn't sound promising. Yet, as Elias stared at her shimmering form, he couldn't ignore the desperation in her eyes, or the weight of what she was asking. This wasn't just about survival for Leora's people, it was about hope. About finding a way to coexist peacefully in a universe often defined by conflict. "Show me," he said finally, surprising even himself. If this bond is so important, show me how it works. Leora hesitated, clearly taken aback by his sudden willingness. Then, after a moment, she reached out and placed her hands gently on either side of his face. Her touch was cool but not unpleasant, sending a faint tingling sensation through his skin. Closing her eyes, she leaned closer until their foreheads nearly touched. "Relax," she murmured. "Let me show." At first, nothing happened. Then, slowly, Elias felt a warmth spreading from where her hands rested, flowing like liquid sunlight through his veins. His vision blurred, and suddenly, he wasn't in the tent anymore. He was floating. No, flying. Through space, surrounded by stars brighter than anything he'd ever seen. Nebulas swirled around him in vibrant hues, and distant planets loomed large, their surfaces teeming with life. He could feel the pulse of the cosmos, an endless rhythm connecting everything. But it wasn't just sight or sound, it was understanding. In that moment, Elias grasped concepts beyond human comprehension. The delicate balance of ecosystems across galaxies, the fragility of existence itself. And yet, amid all this beauty, there was pain too. He saw flashes of Leora's homeworld reduced to ruins, its skies darkened by war. He felt her grief, sharp and raw, mingling with his own emotions. When the vision ended, Elias stumbled backward, gasping for air. His legs gave out beneath him, and he collapsed onto the ground, trembling. Leora knelt beside him, concern etched across her features. "You see now," she whispered. "Hope lies in unity, not fear." Elias nodded weakly, still reeling from the experience. The bond had shown him wonders, but it had also left him drained, his body feeling heavier than before. As much as he wanted to help her, he couldn't deny the cost. Could he handle more? Was humanity ready for such a leap? The questions lingered unanswered, hanging over them like storm clouds. The fragile peace between Elias and Leora was shattered the very next night. Exhausted from the bond they had shared, Elias had fallen into a deep sleep, his body still recovering from the energy exchange. But just as dawn began to creep over the icy horizon, a deafening roar split the silence outside. The sound reverberated through the tent, shaking its thin walls and jolting Elias awake. What was that? He gasped, scrambling to his feet. His eyes darted toward Leora, who stood rigid near the entrance, her glowing skin dimmed with alarm. "Caliph," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They come." Elias frowned, confusion mixing with rising panic. "Who are the Caliph?" Her hands moved quickly, gesturing frantically as images flooded his mind once more, this time of sleek, predatory ships descending from the sky, their weapons firing beams of devastating energy. He saw cities crumbling under relentless attacks, refugees scattering in terror, and worst of all, he saw beings clad in black armor, their forms shadowy and menacing, hunting down anyone like Leora. "They hunt my kind," Leora explained urgently. "Destroy us. No mercy." Before Elias could respond, another thunderous boom shook the ground, followed by the unmistakable hum of engines powering up. Peering cautiously out of the tent flap, Elias's breath caught in his throat. A massive ship loomed overhead, its jagged design resembling some kind of cosmic predator. Its surface glinted ominously in the pale light, and red targeting lasers swept across the frozen landscape. "We have to move," Elias said sharply, grabbing his survival pack. "If they find us here." "No," Leora interrupted, gripping his arm tightly. "You must go. Leave me. They cannot follow you if I stay." "Are you insane?" Elias snapped, pulling away from her grasp. "I'm not leaving you behind." Her expression hardened, resolve replacing fear. "Listen to me, Elias. You are not ready for this fight. My people, we will handle it. Go now, while you can." Elias hesitated, torn between logic and instinct. Running made sense, staying meant certain death. But abandoning Lyora after everything they'd been through felt wrong. She had trusted him, shown him truths about the universe he could never have imagined. How could he turn his back on her now? As if reading his thoughts, Lyora placed a hand on his chest, her touch surprisingly warm despite her cool exterior. "Hope is stronger than fear," she reminded him softly. "You carry hope. Let me protect it." For a moment, Ilias didn't move. Then, with a growl of frustration, he grabbed the repaired communication console and powered it up. "Fine," he muttered, "but we're doing this together." Working quickly, Ilias broadcast a high-frequency distress signal, encoded with false coordinates, enough to lure the Caliph away from Earth, but close enough to buy them time. Meanwhile, Lyora used her abilities to disrupt the enemy ship's sensors, creating bursts of interference that masked their location. The plan was risky, but it was all they had. Outside, the ship's weapons fired again, narrowly missing the tent as chunks of ice exploded nearby. The air grew thick with tension, every second stretching longer than the last. Finally, the Caliph vessel shifted course, drawn toward the decoy signal. It worked. Ilias breathed, relief flooding through him. But when he turned to thank Lyora, he found her doubled over, her radiant skin flickering weakly. "You gave too much," he realized, horror dawning on his face. "Lyora, no." She managed a faint smile, her voice barely audible. "Worth it," she whispered, "for hope." The shadows closed in around them, but within the tent, a spark of defiance burned brighter than ever. The situation was dire. Lyora's energy reserves were nearly depleted, her once luminous skin now pale and cracked like fragile glass. Her breaths came shallow and uneven, each one a struggle against the weight of exhaustion. Yet, despite her weakened state, her resolve remained unshaken. She refused to back down, even as the Caliph ship circled above, its targeting lasers sweeping closer with every passing second. Ilias knelt beside her, panic clawing at his chest. "There has to be another way," he pleaded, gripping her hand tightly. "You can't keep pushing yourself like this." Lyora shook her head faintly, her glowing eyes locking onto his. "No other way," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship's engines. "Must finish what we started." "What does that even mean?" Ilias demanded, frustration and fear mixing in equal measure. "How are we supposed to fight something like that?" Her gaze softened, and for a moment, she looked almost serene. "Together," she said simply. "Bond fully. Combined strength." Ilias froze, his mind racing. The temporary connection they had shared earlier had left him drained and disoriented, but it had also given him glimpses of power beyond imagination. Could they truly amplify their abilities by deepening the bond? And if they did, would either of them survive? "We don't have time to hesitate," Lyora urged, sensing his doubt. "Trust me, Ilias. Trust us." The words struck a chord deep within him. Despite everything, the danger, the unknown, the overwhelming odds, Ilias realized he did trust her. From the moment she stumbled into his tent seeking warmth, she had shown nothing but courage and selflessness. Now, faced with annihilation, she was willing to sacrifice herself to protect not just him, but humanity itself. "All right," he said finally, his voice steady despite the storm raging inside him. "Let's do it." Lyora nodded, her expression filled with quiet determination. She placed her hands on either side of his face, her touch cool yet electric. Closing her eyes, she began to hum softly, the melodic sound resonating through the tent like a lullaby. Ilias followed her lead, closing his own eyes and focusing on the rhythm of her breathing, the pulse of her energy flowing into him. At first, the sensation was familiar, the same warm glow spreading through his veins, filling him with light. But then it intensified, growing brighter and hotter until it felt like liquid fire coursing through his body. Images flooded his mind once more, but this time they weren't just visions. They were memories, emotions, lifetimes of experience compressed into a single instant. He saw Leora's childhood among the crystalline cities of her homeworld, her joy turning to sorrow as war consumed everything she loved. He felt her pain, her hope, her unwavering belief in unity. And then he saw himself, not as he was, but as he could be. Stronger, faster, connected to something greater than himself. When the bond reached its peak, Elias opened his eyes to find the world transformed. The icy moon glowed with newfound vibrancy, every detail sharp and vivid. His senses expanded beyond human limits, allowing him to perceive the Caliph ship's movements with perfect clarity. Beside him, Leora stood tall, her skin radiant once more, but there was a fragility to her presence, as though the effort had pushed her to her absolute limit. "Now," she whispered, her voice strained but resolute. Together, they unleashed their combined energy in a blinding burst of light. The force rippled outward, striking the Caliph vessel and disabling its weapon systems. Alarms blared from the ship as it faltered midair, its sleek frame shuddering under the unexpected assault. For a moment, it seemed like victory, but Elias knew better. As the Caliph retreated temporarily, Leora collapsed into his arms, her light fading rapidly. "I must stay," she murmured weakly, "to ensure they do not return." "No," Elias protested, tears welling in his eyes. "You'll die." She smiled faintly, her fingers brushing his cheek. "Hope lives on," she said softly. "Remember that." Before he could argue further, she stepped away, her form shimmering like stardust caught in the wind. Then, with one final glance, she disappeared into the snow, leaving Elias alone amidst the ruins of their battle. The silence that followed Leora's departure was deafening. Elias stood motionless in the snow, staring at the spot where she had vanished, his chest tight with grief and disbelief. The icy wind whipped around him, carrying with it the faint traces of her presence, her melodic hums, the warmth of her touch, the glow of her unwavering determination. She was gone, but her sacrifice lingered in every breath he took. For a long time, Elias didn't move. He couldn't. His mind replayed their final moments together. The bond they had forged, the energy they had shared, the way she had looked at him with such trust and resolve. It wasn't fair. She had given everything to protect not just him, but humanity itself. And now, all he had left were memories, and the heavy burden of carrying her legacy forward. When the shock finally began to ebb, Elias forced himself to act. The Caliph ship was still retreating, its systems damaged but not destroyed. He knew they would return eventually. Creatures like them didn't give up easily. But thanks to Leora's bravery and the bond they had formed, they had bought themselves precious time. Time to prepare, time to warn others, time to hope. Gathering what little strength he had left, Elias packed up his gear and made his way back to his damaged spacecraft. Every step felt heavier than the last, both physically and emotionally, but he pushed through the exhaustion. When he reached the ship, he powered up its emergency beacon and transmitted a detailed report about the encounter. He included everything: Leora's story, the Caliph threat, the concept of symbiotic bonds, and the importance of unity in the face of danger. His message ended with a single line: "Hope is stronger than fear." Days later, rescue arrived in the form of a recovery vessel sent from Earth. By then, Elias was barely conscious, his body drained from the bond and the harsh conditions of the moon. As medics carried him aboard, he clutched a small shard of crystalline material he had found near their campsite, a fragment of Leora's essence, glowing faintly in his palm. Back on Earth, Elias became an advocate for interstellar cooperation. He spoke publicly about his experience with Leora, sharing her story with anyone who would listen. At first, many dismissed him as delusional or overly idealistic. But over time, his words gained traction. Scientists began studying the shard he had brought back, discovering traces of energy signatures unlike anything ever recorded. These findings sparked renewed interest in peaceful exploration and diplomacy, leading to the formation of new alliances across the stars. Years passed, and though Elias never forgot Leora, he found solace in knowing that her sacrifice hadn't been in vain. Humanity learned from her example, embracing the idea that survival depended not on isolation, but on connection. In the vastness of space, hope became a guiding light, a beacon reminding everyone that even in the darkest times, unity could overcome fear. One evening, as Elias gazed at the night sky, he thought he saw a faint shimmer among the stars. For a moment, it almost looked like her, Leora, smiling softly, her luminous eyes filled with pride. Then, just as quickly, the shimmer faded, leaving only the endless expanse of the cosmos. But Elias didn't feel alone. Somewhere out there, Leora's people were safe, rebuilding their lives thanks to her courage. And somewhere closer to home, humanity was learning to reach for the stars, not with weapons, but with open hands. In the end, Leora's light had touched more lives than she could have ever imagined. And in that knowledge, Elias found peace.